Yeah, hi. It's a pleasure to be here, and yes, it just literally came through this week that I'll be joining the board of the Swedish Film Institute. So this may be possibly the last time that I feel completely free to speak my mind. We've talked a little bit between us at the keynotes, and it's funny because we hadn't coordinated, but you're going to think we have because everything slots into each other so well. I'm also just going to start my clock so I don't go over time. I have a background in broadcasting. That's where I came from originally. I started out a lifetime ago as a film critic, and actually I still do some TV and radio things when the mood strikes me. If it's something irresistible, like the hosting and co-producing the official Swedish Downton Abbey after show on television, or a radio program, a serious music radio program about film music, then I'm still going to do that. But I have two other sort of main jobs now. One of these is being a media analyst. So the Nostradamus Project is coming out of the Nordic film market at the Gothenburg Film Festival, Göteborg Film Festival. And at nostradamusproject.org you can download our easily digestible reports on the near future of the screen industries, which we release for free every year. But I also have this other career as an analog experience designer. And that's actually the hat that I'm going to wear today, even though I'm going to lean on all of my knowledge about the film industry. And I would also say right now that we're going to publish all of the slides on the website, and I'm also going to give you some links there to videos that give a slightly longer introduction to the sort of craft of designing experiences for humans, if you get excited about this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to very briefly run through a few sort of experience design basics. There are diagrams, don't panic, I'll explain them as we go. And the good news is that actually everything that I'm going to say is completely, utterly obvious. Like, it might sound surprising when I say it, but at the end of it you'll be like, yeah, I knew that. And you will in fact know that, because what we're doing here today is talking about the business of being a human, humaning, and we're all very good at humaning as humans. You can absolutely hire a design agency like mine to help you with this stuff, and perhaps once you get to like really advanced community design issues, or you want to change an existing culture that's become toxic or something like that, then you should. Okay, fundamentally, this is stuff that we all know. What we're going to talk about is placing the thing at the center of the diagram that now says the work, but that would be the film, for instance, in the context of a film screening, in its sort of wider human context. Now, if we think about what affects my choice, and my choice of a film and my experience of a specific film, conventional wisdom in the film industry would suggest that it's a function of the quality of the work, the quality of the film that is, and the expectations communicated about the specific film. So, but I would argue that this is a very simplified view of how picking a film actually operates. From an experience design perspective, it looks more like this. So at the heart, you have the work, and around it you have, and actually you can also, all of these diagrams you can read as a timeline if you want to, from left to right, but around the film you have the experience of accessing the film, so in this case, going to a movie theater. And then what kinds of reactions and engagements with that film are possible for me as an audience member to have. Those are determined by norms in the relevant audience communities to which I belong, or that you as an institution generate. And with audience communities, I don't mean like abstract target groups or something like that, but I mean actual physical humans, like my family with whom I go to the cinema, or the people who are physically present at a specific screening, or the potential and actual participants in a filmmaker Q&A. Those are audience communities. And the norms of those audience communities are in turn strongly affected by what we could call movie-going culture in general, and that of course is part of what we could call a wider film culture and so on. And that's why we're not actually competitors, that's why we're all supporting each other's work. When people in the industry, in fact even some exhibitors, talk about the challenges that cinemas are facing in a changing media landscape, they often make it sound as though the product, the service that cinemas provide is exclusive access to the work. Like, we are a place where you can go and see a movie when you cannot see it anywhere else. That's not I mean, that's just wrong on so many levels, as I will explain. If they are slightly smarter, they can look at cinemas and say, we are a place, especially art house cinemas, we are a place that offers curation. And as Bobby just said, curation is indeed super very important in an age of abundance, and it is a reason to come and see films at your space specifically, and it's important to what you're doing, but it is not all that we as exhibitors are doing. Because curation is happening in many places. Curation is also happening at MUBI. So clearly that's not unique to what cinemas are providing. When we're listening to actual humans discussing how to spend an evening, they very often decide to go to the cinema before picking the film. The film is not irrelevant, but it is very often a secondary consideration. And even when going to see a specific hit movie, for instance, is at the core, the discussion isn't really about seeing that work sort of in a general way. It's about seeing it in a specific manner, seeing it in the cinema. Because of course, with almost any film today, you could just as easily and for free pirate it and watch it at home, which would probably be more comfortable. So seeing the film isn't actually the product, the experience of going to the movies is. Our medium is not film. The filmmakers' medium is film. Our medium is cinemas. And this means that we're not in the business of screening movies. We are in the business of designing experiences. And if your business model involves a customer ever coming back, which it should, you're also in the business of building relationships. So in other words, what we are doing as exhibitors is designing communities of people, people who have a relationship to your institution, to the film culture that you're part of, and ideally also, in fact, to each other. So I'm just going to do like experience design super basics. So let's think about what an experience is. An experience is part of time and space, a part of time and space in which something changes. It's a part of life that is somehow different from the everyday slog. Experiences often take place in a defined time and space, which we could call a magic circle, or in fact anthropologists do call it a magic circle, which has different qualities from everyday life. Inside it we take on different social roles, other actions are available to us, and those actions might have very different consequences than they might do in another part of our lives. So for example, we can think of a football pitch as a magic circle, and the professional football players, while they are playing, can be violent, for instance, towards each other in a manner that is acceptable there, but the exact same tackle would not be considered acceptable or even legal in the parking lot of the stadium. And that magic circle is in fact nested in another magic circle, where we, watching the game, are also allowed different kinds of actions. So while we're in the stadium, we can, for instance, scream at the top of our lungs language which would get us fired if we did the exact same thing at work. Similarly, watching a film is stepping into the magic circle of the fiction, engaging with the work, but that's again nested in a wider magic circle of the experience of being at a movie theater. And that also comes with its own behaviors. For instance, at a movie theater, it is considered socially acceptable to turn off your cell phone, which it isn't in a lot of other places. And sometimes at the movies, but not always, which is interesting, but inside some cinema magic circles, you are allowed to speak to strangers about the film you have just seen. And this kind of code switching between different social environments is something that we as humans do all the time. That's what enables us to go from like mother to lover to friend, for instance, or to colleague. We can perform these different roles in different contexts. So that in itself doesn't mean that there's a magic circle, that there's an experience happening. But if some kind of transformation happens, for instance, through engagement with an artwork or just like disconnecting and resting a little bit from your everyday life, then that can be an experience. Now, designing experience is about recognizing that audience members are not, in this case, abstracted cerebral film fans who may or may not like Romanian, 3-hour experiences. We're physical animals and we're social beings. And this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I'm sure you've seen in school or somewhere. It's considered to be a slightly problematic model, so let's not think of it as science, let's think of it as a useful checklist. So at the top level, in the self-actualization field, you have things like creativity and fulfillment. And if you want creativity and fulfillment to happen, which you often do when you work in the arts, you need to make sure that all of the basics are in place first. So oxygen, temperature, accessibility, access to water, I cannot emphasize this enough bathrooms, and the bathrooms can't be disgusting, fire safety, all of those things, making sure that there's no fear of violence while I'm watching a film, all of these things are the base level stuff needs to be in place. In fact, even in this lovely room, it's a little bit cold, and that is distracting us from listening, right? Is it? Somebody says. Depends on, again, so there's an individual range, because again, not all humans are identical problematically, but yes, it is in fact cold. So if you're running, but I mean, whatever the baseline things are, and by the way, you can use the cold to engage, to inspire people to lean into each other, so you can also use it for intentional design. But beyond the baseline stuff, that's relatively universal, then all humans want to feel welcome and seen and recognized and respected. And if you're running a cultural venue, and again, those are the middle things. That's what comes before you can engage with art. If you're running a cultural venue, and especially if you want people to be open to new experiences, new kinds of films, participatory interactions, then all of that stuff needs to work first. We know from neuroscience that people process experiences in very specific ways. About 80% of our memory of an experience is formed by the last 20% of an experience, and the rest is dominated by the peak emotions. And if the movies we're showing are any good, the peak emotions will probably be something that happened in the film itself. Now, if we imagine this diagram as a timeline of going to the movies to see a film, people enter the cinema, and then at the red squiggle, we welcome the guests, we create a sense of expectation, we establish a nice atmosphere, and yes, we make sure they have access to enough bathrooms and popcorn and wine, and we make sure that there's not too much standing in line, and that waiting is pleasant and comfortable. And I think if you look at what separates quality cinemas and successful, for instance, art house cinemas from the big chains, it's typically the effort put in here at the red squiggle. We're actually often quite good at this. Now, this is also, and not everybody does this in an aware way, but this is also where you establish and model any kind of tone or behavior or atmosphere that you want people to do, especially if it's different from what they have traditionally expected to do at the cinema. And in fact, it might not be enough to do it once they're there. You may have to have a consistent communication in your advertising, for instance, that suggests the kinds of things that they will be doing at your movie theater. Now, interestingly, people do all of those wonderful things, and it's lovely, and you go in and you sit down and you watch the film, and it's amazing, and you have all of these experiences and feelings. And then we are terrible at what happens after. We focus so much on enabling the viewing of the work that once the work has been viewed, we completely drop the ball. And this is strange, because if the experience of the work has been interesting and successful, and let's assume it has, because we have curated our selection very carefully and we have a lovely movie theater, then at this point, the audience will have all kinds of feelings, and they have experienced something communal. And finally, also just physically on the lower levels, they get to move after sitting down for a really long time, and they need to go to the bathroom and all of that. And what we do at this moment with all of this interesting potential is that we tend to kick them out of a back door into an alley next to a dumpster. Now, this is wasteful and it is risky, and here's why it's wasteful. Any conversation, any elation, any transformation that has happened because of that film is going to happen. People will still talk to each other, but they're not talking to us. They're not talking in the context of the cinema experience. It might happen in a bar, or it might happen online, or it might happen on the way home. There is a potential for enabling some connection between these humans who have just had an experience together. That potential is also wasted, and that's wasteful. It's risky, because if there has been a bad experience with the film, with the venue, with the staff, we have no possibility of diffusing it or contextualizing it. And it's strange that what happens after the film, like historically, I think there have been two big innovations in the exhibition sector. One was that in some cinemas, they actually put a bathroom on the way out, which is nice. And the other is sort of the Q&A after the film. And both of these are great, but I think that with the potential in this room, we can do better. And by the way, I'm not talking about forcing people to interact with each other. Not everybody wants to talk to a stranger after seeing a film. But what I'm talking about is inspiring them to want to do it and enable them, those who choose to do so, to do that. behaviors, norms, actions, reactions, relations, hierarchies, curiosity, bravery, all of these are objects of design. And how on earth do we do that? Well, basically, it's not super complicated. We design the physical environment and we design the social environment. And you have to engage with both because the physical factors like acoustics or the layout of chairs, of course, control or at least signal very strongly what kinds of social interactions are possible or preferable in a space. And the physical environment in your cinema, you can just try, like you can walk around and see what is it possible to do, where can I go, do I understand where I'm meant to go, when is it uncomfortable, when is it annoying, and then you can fix those problems. The social environment is a little trickier to engage with if you're not used to thinking about a social environment as something that can be changed and should be, in fact, designed intentionally. But here are some control questions that you need to ask on behalf of your visitors. Do I like being here? Who can I be in this environment? What can I do here? You want to know how does it feel to be in the room, and how does it feel to be among the other people in the room? How do I as a visitor fit into the hierarchies and behavioral norms that are present in this place? How do I fit into the appearance norms that are present in this space? What is allowed? And is everything allowed for everybody? Are the things that are allowed for some visitors also allowed for me? For instance, I also work a lot with museums. In museums, and I think perhaps also in cinemas, one of the big questions is who is allowed to be loud? Who gets to laugh loudly? I think white middle-aged middle-class people can laugh as loudly as they want. Young brown people who don't look wealthy do not get to laugh as loudly as the white rich people because that will be construed as disturbing. Whereas the rich normies laughing suggests that they have understood the film, for instance. So hierarchies are also always present in the social environments, and we have to design for those as well. But then, of course, those are diagnostic questions. That's if you're looking at a situation that's already existing. What if you want to create something from scratch? What do you do then? Well, I'd say in any kind of experience design, the first question is, what kinds of activities will my participants be doing? For instance, if you're designing a party where you want people to be able to talk to each other, that's what you want them to do, that's the activity is speaking, then you should not also play really loud music in every room, because that undermines speaking, right? This is intuitive stuff as soon as we become aware of it. So cinemas are generally speaking optimized to enable the verbs there in the left-hand column, watch, obey, receive, consume. But the movie theater is a really old medium, and culture has changed around us. And all of those things, the left-hand column things, we can do much better at home. And generally speaking, both arts and entertainment are now in a process of correcting into a more into a more participatory direction. And especially when we go out to a specific place at a specific time to share experiences with other humans, we want more of this sort of right-hand column stuff, engage, reflect, participate, contribute. And if that feels too abstract, you can try and translate it even down to a more practical level, like sitting will be involved. Sometimes will talking be involved? Asking questions, conversing, dining, flirting, what verbs are available in this space and to whom? Everything that happens in your cinema, including the emotions of the people who come there, is a designable surface. That is something that you can make active choices about. That's what I've been saying so far. And when we talk about design, we mean making active choices, questioning everything in the light of what you're trying to achieve. Many things are done in specific ways because it's expected, and expectation is a powerful design tool, but use them on purpose. Sometimes practices are traditional because it works, so that means don't change everything. Just make sure your choices aren't solutions to an earlier generation of challenges. Tradition is also dangerous because human memory is very short. Anything we've done for 20 years feels like it's always been like that. Movie theaters have not always been optimized for passivity. Henry Jenkins likes to show this picture of an early meeting of the Mickey Mouse Club in a Los Angeles movie theater back at a time when crafts, demonstrations, and singing together could be part of your movie palace experience. Who am I in this space? I'm a member. I'm a participant. That's different from just being a viewer. So, if you want people to watch movies in cinemas, the films need to be fantastic and well curated, and the experience of going to the movies needs to be physically pleasant and socially rewarding. And rewarding in this context would mean a feeling of connection to the artwork, but also to your institution and to individuals and communities. And again, even introverts want to be seen, valued, and respected. And what kinds of behaviors or communities are even possible for the movie-going audience is, of course, also a function of movie-going culture on the local level, which Don, I think, will talk about, and on the macro level. So these are different in different places. All of you will have very different potential local cultures that you're engaging with. And of course, also the wider culture, both locally and nationally. But when we think about what a culture is, cultures are continuously constructed out of values and practices. And they interact across all of these levels that we've been talking about. So yes, the kinds of behaviors that you can encourage at and around your cinema are limited by the movie-going culture as it stands in the UK this year. But at the same time, every screening that you host is also iteratively shaping movie-going culture, and therefore shaping the wider culture of this country. And this makes the active design of these experiences into a sacred duty. Because if you believe that film is important, surely the reason for that is that art can change our beliefs about who we are permitted to be and what is possible for us to do. And if you want to change the world, you have to start where you have the influence, where you actually can make change. I would suggest that you start by empowering the people in the spaces you control to expand their worlds by engaging with these films, both individually and together. It also makes business sense. There's no reason today to go somewhere where we are not respected or we are not cared about at all. And this was Experience Design 101, and now you have totally mastered it, and in retrospect it feels completely obvious, I'm sure. And I thought that we would just spend like 1 or 2 minutes at the end looking at this very boring diagram and thinking about VR in the context of cinemas. So I also get to teach participation design to VR filmmakers. And it's funny because, I mean, they'll never tell you on a stage when they're representing their employers, but it's kind of an open secret in the VR community that an absolute majority of VR films are kind of shit. And by the way, confusingly, VR films are often called VR experiences because everybody understands that the medium isn't quite film. So then now we've taken the film out of the diagram, put the VR experience in, and then around the VR experience is the experience of experiencing the VR experience. Okay. So there are a few exceptions. I think Notes on Blindness that you can try at lunch is one of the exceptions that is doing something very, very interesting with the VR medium. But a lot of them are trying to be films, which is a disaster, or they are at best beautiful tech demonstrations, or at worst they are like stepping into a screensaver in 2006. The reason VR often isn't working is that VR makers, especially when they have a filmmaking background, they are not considering VR as a physical and social room. And when you put on the thing, you step into a place. And when you are in a place, then the physical and social environment is very important, as we have discussed for the past 20 minutes. And when you don't allow for that, then the pieces don't work at all. It can become quite jarring. However, you can still, even today, you can screen VR successfully if you build an interesting experience around the sort of dodgy artwork in the middle. And in the short term, this is actually very promising, I think, for cinemas, especially cinemas that are good at making experiences. Yes, you can screen VR right now, and that's a meaningful thing to do, I think. In the long term, however, and in VR long term means about 2 years, VR will offer shared multi-participant experiences where people can explore the same stories together without necessarily being in the same place physically. And VR headsets, of course, are also becoming much more accessible and affordable, and this means that cinemas don't necessarily, there's no automatic place for cinemas in this ecosystem, unless we as exhibitors, become masters of offering physical and social spaces that people want to be part of, the places where people feel that they can belong, and where they can engage and talk about and reflect on culture in a meaningful manner. We need to solve that for every kind of filmmaking, and I think if we end up solving that for every kind of filmmaking, then VR can also be part of the menu in the movie theaters. That's what we need to do, while continuing, naturally, as you have always been, to be curators of the very best filmmaking. Thank you.